Hello and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this small little webinar on how software is deployed. It's a question that we keep getting on every single roadshow, and we would like to address this little need, and would like to clarify a couple of things about first software in general. Then we will talk about how ERP software is implemented in a more specific way, and lastly we will also look into how Odoo is deployed and why it's different from other software. So. If we take a look at our agenda for the day, as I mentioned, we will talk about software implementation, which is a quite broad term. In the second section, we will be talking about ERP, so enterprise resource planning, which means all the software that essentially runs a company. And lastly, we will talk about the Odoo ERP, which is an ERP system that's a little bit different to a traditional system. So let's dive right in. So let's start with the software. Software, okay. What it actually is and how it's deployed. First, we need a programming language. A programming language is basically the starting point of every single implementation. We can choose different programming languages such as Python, C++, whatsoever, but these programming languages obviously have their specificities and their different syntax capabilities in order to be able to develop different things for the particular software. Now, the second part of rolling out a standard software would be a business analysis or a requirements analysis. What this means is actually just figuring out what we want to do. So before implementing any software, we need to analyze these requirements. We need to gather information about where we want to get to, what this tool needs to help us achieve. And then we also need to define some performance expectations and other specific needs. Thirdly, we also need to talk about the design and architecture. So that means that the software, when it comes to the implementation, it has to have a suitable architecture and all the components of the system to make it a whole functional system. It also includes creating models, diagrams, and flowcharts to be able to illustrate all the models and components of the entire system. And we arrived at the first point where we actually get our hands dirty. So we are writing code. What does actually writing code mean? Writing code is the actual implementation or of a given programming language that we discussed. And basically, it's a step-by-step motion of translating the requirements into the architecture and the design of the software. The next step would be defining the algorithm and also the data structures. An efficient software actually often requires a really good algorithm and a good data structure. These algorithms, of course, define the step-by-step procedures of performing specific tasks in a certain system. And basically, they also organize the data and store it efficiently. The next step, once we wrote all the code in the data structure and the algorithm, of course, testing and debugging, because not all code is clear and not all code is flawless. So it's kind of like painting a painting. There is always a little bit more to be adjusted to make it perfect, right? So the software implementation also includes a rigorous testing part, where we test each test case, we execute certain commands, and we try to figure out where we have some bugs that would prevent us from using the software correctly. And the next step would be obviously integration and deployment. So this would refer to most companies use over 14 different software. So that means that there will always be cases where you need to connect different software to your current system. Usually this is done via APIs. So these APIs are nothing else but bridges between two softwares to allow inter-software communication and allow your system to run and move data between two systems. The last or almost last step would be maintenance and updates. Many companies think that this is a very, very small thing, but it's actually extremely important. So once the software is deployed, it requires updates to fix certain issues. as you know from your phone, of course, you always get a new update which fixes some certain issues as we move forward, and the software gets better and better and better. What we usually don't really think about is that as we move with the updates, and the more software we write, the more technical depth we accumulate. So that means that the more custom code we write, the more maintenance it will require in the future. So we also need to keep this in mind. And as every good developer knows, documentation is key. So the documentation process is essential. It includes creating both the technical documentation, the user manuals, the guidelines that describe a certain functionality. And this also helps both developers, users, and any other stakeholder to maintain the software efficiently. And lastly, versions control. So the software integration is often involves collaboration amongst different developers. They need to think about different versioning, such as management of Git and GitHub, so they can track back the changes, and in case something goes wrong, they don't need to start over again, but they just go back to the last change, and then they can basically get up to speed very quickly. So this is all about software in general. So this is a very broad term. And once we transition to ERP, which is a type of software, so ERP is referring to Enterprise Resource Planning, which means that this software is going to help you and your organization run your entire company. Okay, so where ERP is quite unique, and what actions we need to take. The first one would be planning and preparation. So that means that when we are implementing an ERP, it involves a lot of assessment of the organization's needs, the setting of goals and objectives, and also ultimately creating a project plan. All key stakeholders need to be identified, and they need to be involved in this process. What's very important when it comes to the ERP is that the two core groups of stakeholders are the users, and sometimes if you are talking about a bigger company, the decision makers. Now these two groups might have different interests, so we also need to address them as such. Remembering what's also very important is that when we are buying an ERP, it's not just a transactional process, like I go down to the store and buy a piece of bread, but it's a co-creation between the implementer and also the company who is implementing the software on their operations. The second step of the ERP would be analyzing the requirements. So basically understanding the organization and how crucial and successful ERP implementation is. It also includes conducting detailed analysis on the business processes, how everything is done today, so analyzing and charting all the workflows, and also the data management needs of the company. So quite a lot of hats to juggle here. And lastly, we also need to identify the gaps and the improvements that we need to make in order to implement the ERP process successfully. The third part would be the vendor selection, which is quite interesting. We often say selecting an ERP is like a good marriage, so it's usually quite long term, and we need to be careful about which vendor we work with, which partner we work with, and make sure that this collaboration is off to a good start. Basically, the average is average lifespan of an ERP or in a company is at least 10 years. Sometimes it's even longer. So we really need to take this into consideration. We need to think about the offering, the reputation of the vendor, the support services, the pricing model, of course. In order to achieve a full picture, we typically recommend demonstrations, discussions with the vendor to see their references, and ultimately we need to try to figure out what is the best fit for our organization's needs. There is a wide range of software providers out there, so if on one hand we would look at the proprietary ones, such as SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle, etc. On the other hand, we could highlight Odoo, which is The main difference would be that Odoo is open source and the previously mentioned ones are proprietary. So that means that on the Odoo side, it's a little bit more easy to implement changes and basically onboard new features. And when we are talking about the next step, so we have selected our vendor. The next step would be system configuration. So we would be, most ERP systems are very configurable and flexible, so that that companies can tailor their own workflows or the software to their needs. So the system configuration involves setting up modules, workflows, configuring user roles as well, and also adding permissions and mapping business processes of all of these software functionalities. This step also ensures that the ERP system is aligned with all the requirements that the organization may or may not have. Once we are done with the system configuration, we will commence with the data migration. So the data migration is a critical step. Sometimes it's quite difficult. So we need to think about a smooth transition between two systems. So we are leaving the old system behind and we are starting working in a new system. So here it's quite important to understand that we don't need all the historical data in most cases. Sometimes it's enough if we have, for example, the previous calendar year, because we won't use anything else from the previous years anyway. The next step would be customization and integration. So in most cases, most organizations have a little bit custom workflows, so that would require some tailored tailoring to their specific needs. So the customization also involves modifying the ERP's code, so changing the code a little bit, and adding new features to tailor it further. The integration also ensures that the data transfer that we mentioned before, when we are talking about APIs and third-party systems, and that it works properly. For example, we have a system which runs the ERP, but we would have the CRM or the accounting software feeding the data and exchanging data between our system via an API. Okay. The next step would be, of course, the user training. So the user training is extremely important. People by nature are quite risk averse. That means that they will usually resist change, and it's going to be, in some cases, quite difficult to implement a new ERP system. Basically, it's very important that we make this as smooth as possible. We usually try to not to do any sort of user trainings on Fridays or before big holidays. The key is that the user needs to use the system and needs to get accustomed to how things were done before, and then the new way of doing things in the new ERP. Okay. Now, of course, now we train the users, and now we need to test all the functionalities and all the custom code that we have added, right? Basically, the way it works is that the testing and the quality assurance is always done before deploying the whole ERP system. So before we go live, before we leave our old system behind, we need to test the new system to make sure that there are no bugs or any other issues that might make our life more difficult. And lastly, we also recommend to do user acceptance testing, UAT, which should also be conducted before the ERP software is actually rolled out, and to see if it meets the organization's requirements. Now, we got to the go live point. So the go live is when we actually go live with the new software, and as we mentioned, we leave everything old behind. So what that means is that everything has been validated, everything has been tested, and the software runs quite well. We leave the old system behind. We need to carefully plan this beforehand. We need to validate the data. We need to have, obviously, adequate backups, because if we don't have backups, we can start from scratch again, which is not nice. And this will also help us ensure a really smooth transition, and we don't have to worry about anything else, and we are happy to use our new system. But we don't stop here. There is also one last step, which is the post-implementation optimization. So after we went live, we are talking about an ongoing support and optimization process. So the organization needs a mechanism or an implementing partner to adapt any changes or any questions, any issues, any maintenance needs. For example, if there is a bug that we forgot about, if there is a feature we forgot about, we need to keep this in mind, and we need to co-create the system so it's fine-tuned to our business needs and to help us to manage the business the best possible way we can do. Now, we talked about the software, again, a huge term. Then we zoomed in on the ERP side. And lastly, we are going to be talking about the Odoo ERP, which is a quite specific ERP itself. Now, here you see on the left hand, the Odoo dashboard, both on the PC and the mobile device. Basically, we start with the partner selection, because we don't need to select the vendor now. We already know that we want Odoo, so it makes our life a little bit easier. But what's important with the partner selection? It's actually a rather easy process, but it can be quite confusing sometimes as well. If we go on odoo.com/partners, you will see the entire Odoo official partner network across the globe, which spans over 190 countries, which is quite a bit. And you will be able to filter out based on your particular location, the level and the expertise of the partner that you may require. So again, we are going back to the marriage part. It's a long-lasting relationship, so we need to select the right partner. Again, as we mentioned, we are also going to need an analysis. So when it comes to the analysis, we can either do a gap analysis or an ROI. What's the gap? Where the two differ is actually the gap is being used for the requirements of the customer and what the customer actually wants. And on the other hand, the ROI, that would be more closer to the Odoo methodology. So we will also include the links in the description. The Odoo methodology and the return on investment focuses more on the efficiencies gained by implementing Odoo in your business. So in order to make sure that the organization is actually gaining efficiencies, it's gaining time, it's reducing unnecessary spending and optimizing costs, of course. The analysis can last from a couple of days up to a couple of months, depending on the complexity of the project. So this also needs to be bared in mind that the more simple or the bigger the company, it varies greatly. Obviously, one suggestion that we give from Odoo side is that the closer the client stays to the standard Odoo, meaning the off-the-shelf solution, the more easy and the cheaper the implementation will be. The next step, of course, would be the proof of concept. So we will need to take a look at a fully configured Odoo without any customization, but just setting a few features up in the settings panel without connecting any APIs, any custom code whatsoever, to be able to take a look at the look and feel of Odoo and to see if this is the right solution for our business. The scope is to be defined, so basically as the maximum you can get from a standard solution without no developments. Although there is no data imported, or no third-party apps integrated, you and the company will be fully functional, and you should be able to have a realistic feel of what Odoo would look like in your day-to-day life. Okay. So next step. So we configured, we had the analysis, we talked about the proof of concept. Now we have something that's working, but we decided that we will implement Odoo fully. So obviously we will need to do the data import. With a fully functional proof of concept, the customer and the project manager should be able to demonstrate the final solution to the key users, who should be able to evaluate this and see if this is the right solution. And basically, we need to make a decision, as we mentioned before, if we want to import all the historical data or just the data from the last year or period. This will also help us quite a lot in the further down the process and think about how to proceed from here. We mentioned custom developments. So custom developments should be split in two groups. The first group should be the need to haves. So the custom developments we cannot live without. These should be prioritized and they should also be implemented before we go live. And then the nice to haves which we can live without, they are just more cosmetic feature and they are not critical to our business. So that means that all of these features can be implemented in a second stage on a second rollout. We can also consider these the API connections, which can be quite complex in some cases. So we also need to think about how we are going to implement this based on the analysis and also the roadmap of the entire project. The next step would be validating the program and validating and training the users. So once the connections are done, all the custom code has been written, all the custom features have been applied. We are going to be looking at training the users, which can be done, which is typically done by an official Odoo partner. However, there are many also trainings available online, videos, different materials, and also we publish quite a lot on YouTube, as you can see now. So that can also be used to deepen your knowledge and make sure that you're up to speed before you roll out Odoo. And the last step would be, of course, deployment and go live. So once the users and the whole organization has been trained, they will be able to reap the benefits of Odoo on a day-to-day basis. At this point, it is critical that all necessary processes have been covered. If we realize that something huge and critical is missing, we need to go back and we need to make sure that we have that custom code, we have those APIs connected, and all the system is configured correctly. What we typically recommend is to do a waterfall approach. So as we mentioned, the need to haves go first and the nice to haves go later. So basically we can have a second, third, fourth, fifth rollout afterwards, but we don't want to confuse the users because Odoo is quite broad. We have over 50 applications just in standard. So that's quite a broad spectrum. So we recommend to go workflow by workflow and then, deepening the knowledge and making sure that everybody understands what they need to do on a daily basis. Now, some key takeaways that I would like the audience to take home. First one is select the right partner. So always stick to odoo.com/partners. There you see all the partners. It's guaranteed by Odoo that they are actually an Odoo partner. The second one is always get a proper analysis done, because if there are any hidden things that they haven't been analyzed, of course that can result in unnecessary costs, and of course the project can become a little bit lengthier to implement. And the last thing is to make sure that you make the right decision and the right balance between tailoring your workflows to Odoo as it is, or tailoring Odoo to your workflows. So that's more or less it. So the second deployment we covered as well. Let's jump to the question and answer. So we are back to you with the question and answer session. Let's go from the top. So the Center Targu Mures, anybody interested in our deployment methodology? I'm not sure if that's a question or not, but regardless, if you would like to take a deeper look at the Odoo implementation methodology, you can find it online. You just Google Odoo implementation methodology and the PDF is there. It's quite easy to find, and you can study it. It's a short document. It will take you 1 or 2 hours to go through. Next question: what if I want to develop my own add-ons instead of going through one of your partners? Of course, you are welcome to do so. If you are a gifted developer, we are open source, of course, so you are free to touch the code. Just make sure you are quite familiar with the code base and don't make too many mistakes. In a project, we must ensure the blueprint must be agreed so that endless projects don't occur. The boundaries should be clear. Yes, indeed. So I fully agree with this. The boundaries should be quite clear. So what's important here is that you have a proper analysis and everything is documented. So both the company's or the client's requirements and also the partner's analysis. So it works both ways. You need to make sure that everything is on paper, and then you are able to refer back if something has been left out or something has not been included. Do you need to be an IT specialist? If you don't have IT skills, can somebody be trained? Of course, people can be trained. That's not really a problem. But the real question is to figure out if you are just customizing. By customizing, I mean you are creating, you're changing the settings in Odoo, or you would like to add some custom code that would also affect some logic on the backend. So these are the two sides of the coin that you need to be sure of. Wow, we are speeding up a little bit. How do you assure partners are prepared to offer their services to different type of clients? It's more or less the philosophy of Odoo is we want to provide an ERP as affordable as possible. So if you are a very small client, let's say 1 or 2 users, of course you won't need you don't have workflows, right? You don't really have many custom processes. So it's quite easy for you to adjust and take the off-the-shelf solution, and basically you can implement yourself. If you're a company who has 1,000 employees, you will probably have a need for a partner who can guide you and make sure that you're on the right path, so you don't make costly mistakes and you don't have any issues in the future. Actually, I attended the webinar thinking it was Odo Development, no longer rocket science. This is not a webinar about development. It's more about software as a whole. So it's more meant for the general public and mostly for clients and people who have no clear idea about how software is done. What is the difference between Odoo software and online? Okay, so the online version, the SaaS version, when you create a trial, it's running on our cloud, and basically you are able to use all the applications in a trial mode, and you can only change or customize via the settings. Okay. Now the difference between the Odoo software, I guess, what you are referring to would be if you want to add custom code, you have 2 options. The first option would be to go on a hosting type called Odoo SH, which is running on the Google Cloud. And then the second option would be you can even download the database to your own server or to your own computer and run the server from there. And there you are able to get more flexibility, and you can add APIs, different connections, custom code, whatsoever. Is it possible to implement Odoo in a non-profit pharmacy? Inventory management, dispensing medications, managing appointments, etc. Yes, we have quite a lot of pharmacy references in our reference page as well. And basically inventory management, I would say, is one of our strong suits. What's the difference between the Odoo community development and enterprise? Especially for the number of users, I have 1,000 of users. So the big difference between the community and the enterprise is this. The community version is entirely open source, which means you don't have to pay for it, but it has a very limited set of features. And the Odoo enterprise version is a paid per user type of service. And basically here you have the full feature set of Odoo and all the applications and all the features. So that's kind of the 2 different parts. I guess the follow-up question would be, what would be the pricing of Odoo in your country? You can go as Miles here mentions, odoo.com/pricing, so you can see the exact pricing in your location. Why is the community version not updatable? Because it's open source. So basically the community version means that you do everything yourself. Behind the community version, there is no company that would do the upgrades or would do any developments, because you are simply not paying for any service. Behind the enterprise version, we guarantee the quality of service, we guarantee the upgrades, the bug fixes, etc., etc. what batch import features does Odoo have, and where do I go and read about this? I would refer you to odoo.com/documentation, so you will be able to find all of these things. Can we have a workflow or blueprint as a sample document? I'm not sure I understand this question. You can have the workflow and the blueprint of basically the format of what you upload as a sample document is limited only to PDF, PNG, and a couple of other formats, if this is what you're referring to. Guy, a good question from Guy. We will be implementing Odoo. I'm concerned about the amount of product data we have and having to manually enter it. This part, I can confirm that it's not the case. So if you have to, let's say you have 10,000 different products, you can upload it via an Excel sheet. You just need to make sure that you follow the format that Odoo will be able to understand it. So in order to do this, you can go and download a sample import sheet, and then you structure your data based on that, and you can upload it as such. Does Odoo have training and certifications? Yes. So we have all the videos available, all the training videos are available free of charge. And for the certification, you will have to pay for, and you need to reach at least 70% to pass the particular certification. Can I show you a critically important question in the analysis stage? There is a template in the Odoo implementation methodology, but what would be the most important question to ask? The most important question to ask would be to basically have everything documented, and on one hand, you should think through what you need and what you absolutely require, and on the other hand, you should let the partner guide you on how the whole implementation should go and give you suggestions. You can talk to multiple partners as well. It's up to you how would you tackle the same program. Is Odoo able to integrate an EFT POS reader in Europe? I have no clue. I'm not a POS specialist, but I'm sure you can ask the community, and we can also check that in-house. I see no more questions are coming in, so I think we can slowly wrap this up. Thank you for your attention, thank you for your questions, and have a great day. One more question. For enterprise, and each client has a specific options. Is this possible to have? I'm not sure what you're referring to, but basically when it comes to the pricing itself, you have basically two options. The first one is the fully standard option. As we mentioned, it's only you will be hosted on our cloud, and you can only make changes via the settings. And then the custom option, where you will be able to add any custom code, you will be able to actually touch the logic or the backend engine of Odoo. So that's more or less it. When it comes to e-commerce, what is the switch and how does it link to your account? Well, basically, if you're switching from another software, obviously you would have to export the data and import it into Odoo. If you used Odoo before, then it's simple because it's cross-connected already. Do you plan a long-term release support version of Odoo? We only support the last 3 versions of Odoo. That means that the version 17 is coming out shortly. So we will be supporting 17, 16, and 15 with bug fixes. Why does Odoo not allow commercial database connections? I don't have an idea. Sorry for that. What is the risk to implement Odoo from non-Odoo partners? Well, obviously there is no quality control, so we as Odoo are responsible for our partner network. So that means we actually require quite a lot from our partners in terms of the trainings they need to go through, the implementations, the references, etc. So if you find them on the Odoo partner website, then that's already a good start of quality, etc. Okay, thank you very much, and have a great day.